Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Damien.
And I'm Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want interdependent study to be a space where we're always learning with one another, and that's exactly what we do. Aaron, you're up this week.
Yes.
What are you bringing to the table today?
I am bringing an article called 10 Egregious Things You May Not Know About the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This was published by the Center for American Progress.
Yes.
And it's really informative about this infuriating new law that cuts big holes into the very inadequate safety net that we have in this country.
Yes.
It's a huge wealth transfer from regular people to the most wealthy people. And the article opens with this, quote, "This week, congressional Republicans passed a radical budget and tax bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, nearly entirely on a party line vote. Many of the plan's key elements will increase families' costs for healthcare, food, and utilities, such as historic cuts to Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as terminating tax credits to produce more American-made energy, and are deeply unpopular according to recent survey data. Several provisions, however, remain less understood because they've received less media attention or were added during rushed negotiations that took place overnight and behind closed doors." The article details several lesser-known provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that will increase costs and limit Americans' ability to meet their basic needs, create a slush fund for Trump administration overreach, and waste taxpayer money.
Yes.
So that's how they open this article.
Yeah.
And then they go into the 10 egregious things that are egregious. And those things include defunding Planned Parenthood, increasing healthcare costs for people on Medicare, new out-of-pocket costs for people on Medicare, getting rid of food assistance paperwork waivers, increasing student loan payments, giving $30 billion more to DHS for their Gestapo deportation squads, tax breaks for millionaires' investments, and tax breaks for private school donors.
Yeah.
Reading this article was like an exercise in mindfulness because I had to pause and feel the rage.
Yes.
And then let it pass and keep reading.
Yeah.
There's a lot of breathing
Yeah.
in between cursing and making comments in it about how these people are asshats.
Yes.
And this might be, I'm anticipating that this might be the episode that we crash out the most. But we'll see, I guess. So yeah, anyway, where do you want to start on your first crash out?
I love everything that you just said. In particular, I think about...
Oh, so you're a fan of this?
Yeah, just stop it. I'm a fan of what you said about it. In particular, like you mentioned, or you said the words inadequate safety net. And a lot of what I thought about was just how much this act is going to hurt real people who desperately need help. And in so many ways, the safety measures and safety provisions and safety net that we have just does not cut it in this great country of ours. And so I love
Heavy air quotes.
heavy air quotes.
I heard the air quotes. I just wanted to emphasize it.
So I love what you said there. And I agree. Everything I read, each one was just... it made me more and more angry as I kept going.
Exactly.
But I will say I appreciated this article, and I'm glad you found it because, there's definitely a lot in this, like, just really stupidly named bill. One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's such a stupid name.
Yeah. Continuing the theme of how stupid all this is.
All of it is. But there's so much in this that I hadn't heard about or, hadn't learned about. And so this was a really great primer for that. And I really appreciated their approach to highlight the lesser known provisions because I think there's, probably a ton of us who don't know about these provisions given how they came to be. And particularly thinking about the fact that they highlighted the potential impact of them. So for me, I think one of the most horrifying and despicable aspects of this bill, which is kind of hard to say because all of it is, but particularly the impact that folks who are on Medicaid and Medicare are going to feel with this bill. And it just felt like a lot when I read this. So one example of the impact was this, quote, "The bill would prevent women on Medicaid from accessing any Planned Parenthood services, including STI screenings, pap smears, breast cancer screenings, and prenatal care. This would be exceptionally harmful to Medicaid enrollees, as the majority of people with Medicaid receive contraceptives, 85%, and STI services, 57%, from Planned Parenthood clinics. Another example, quote, the OBBBA blocks implementation of an existing regulation that makes it easier for eligible low-income Medicare beneficiaries to enroll in Medicare savings programs that lower Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket costs. Medicare savings programs make healthcare accessible to Medicare enrollees who often live on very limited incomes and few assets. Without enrolling in these programs, even modest medical bills can be unaffordable, and basic access to care can slip out of reach. Blocking the regulation would prevent states from streamlining and automating enrollment into Medicare savings programs. As a result, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated that the earlier House-passed bill, with similar provisions also in the Senate-passed bill, would cause 1.3 million Medicare enrollees eligible for these programs to lose or forgo their Medicaid coverage and therefore be unable to access the assistance. And then finally, if that's not enough, one more example, quote, all states currently have the option to impose out-of-pocket costs such as premiums and co-payments on some Medicaid enrollees. The OBBBA goes significantly further by forcing states to charge Medicaid enrollees with family incomes between 100% and 138% of the federal poverty level, just $15,650 for a single adult who qualify for the program based on income alone, up to $35 per health care service. While cost sharing would be capped at 5% of a family's household income, that can add up to thousands of dollars per year. Yeah. And so, all of these examples of the impact of this bill on folks on Medicare and Medicaid are just wild and really highlight how much this administration, I think, does not care about this population and low-income individuals and low-income families. And, it felt like in every example there, the access to affordable health care has either been completely eliminated or just rocketed out of reach for these folks financially. And I know that the cruelty is the point, but it's just so sickening to read about and to know that this is coming down the pike for folks.
Yeah, and so especially that last piece you said about the increased out-of-pocket costs for people, I feel like I know people who have full-time salaried jobs who will not go to the doctor because of the copay that they have.
100%.
And they're making a lot more than $15,000 annually.
Absolutely.
And that copay is like, well, it's probably just a cold.
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
We were literally just joking about this in my office, and I have a colleague who I will not name who talked about, I'm not going because of the copay.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, it's wild.
Yes.
Wild. So another thing so I mentioned this earlier is the food assistance programs.
Oh, yes.
So the article says, quote, the beautiful bill reverses bipartisan SNAP paperwork requirement exemptions for vulnerable groups of Americans, including veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and youth aging out of foster care that were passed into law in 2023. The CBO estimated this change would kick 270,000 people in these categories off of their food assistance for 3 years for not being able to comply with the burdensome task of constantly providing proof they are working enough hours. These groups of SNAP beneficiaries are particularly vulnerable to food insecurity and face barriers that make it much more difficult to find and keep a stable job when, for instance, they have little work experience beyond military service, do not have a permanent address, or never graduated high school. Ending these exemptions will cause hunger and poverty to spike among communities that already face severe economic hardship. So, we're cutting these programs that make it easier to access food assistance so that we can use that money for ICE or for a tax break.
Yep, there it is.
For somebody who doesn't need it, who can afford to order out all the time or get pre-made meals. This is what we're doing.
Yep.
Like, think about these groups of people who, for whatever reason, can't do this paperwork or shouldn't need to do this paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being homeless, I don't need to prove that I can't do this paperwork or
Right.
that I can't work.
Right.
I don't have a permanent address. Hard to get a job when you don't have an address.
Yeah.
Why you need me to come down here and fill out this paperwork for how much money a week for food?
Yeah. And no telling if I'll fill that paperwork out. And the bureaucracy of paperwork in government and the back and forth and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's a perverse version of means testing for some of the most vulnerable people in the country.
Yes.
At the expense of, or for the benefit of the most wealthy and for deporting people.
Yeah, absolutely. And what really stands out to me about kind of what I said and what you said is just the numbers there. I mean, I think I said somewhere like 1.3 million Medicare enrollees, and you're talking about 270,000 people. I mean, this is significant numbers of American people, American citizens.
And theoretically, those could be, there could be some overlap between
absolutely.
those groups, but we're talking about almost 1.5 million people.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You kind of joked about this when you introed this piece. They use the word egregious in the title of this article, and I think it's an apt description of the entire bill. But I would say one of the more egregious things in it that they highlight is how it will create this slush fund that you mentioned for unaccountable overreach by the Trump administration. And the thought of that is very scary. And so here's one part of what they shared about this. Quote, the OAAA provides nearly $30 billion to immensely expand enforcement and deportation operations of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, tripling its 2024 annual budget. These funds will supercharge lawlessness by an agency that the Trump administration has operated without accountability, causing chaos in communities across the country. ICE's misuse of its authority, directed by the Trump administration, has resulted in reckless and unfettered actions against immigrants, U.S. citizens, and public officials. It has invited brazen conduct by other federal agents, including violence toward members of Congress. Their actions have shocked the nation, and multiple federal courts have found them unlawful. And there's so much in that statement and analysis that is beyond troubling. The tripling of ICE's budget, tripling of it, the ways in which we have witnessed ICE carry out its mission and mandate in dangerous and illegal ways. And I think most egregious, if we're sticking with that damn word, if that's even possible to say, is how we've seen ICE out in these streets harassing and assaulting and arresting people with impunity. And that has been against all sorts of individuals, including a sitting United States senator. And so, the amount of funding being poured into the military industrial complex is astonishing to me, and is just against everything I believe in. But when you think about the amount of money being poured into ICE as opposed to healthcare and education and social services and that social net you talked about and the other things that help us and serve us, it's just in no way okay.
Yeah, and I think this $30 million is just for this year. Is that right?
Yes.
So the budget for ICE, for DHS, also increases exponentially permanently. Too.
Right.
That's another provision
that
they don't talk about here because that has been covered more.
Yep.
But this is about right now.
Just
they need $30 billion more right now.
Yeah.
And it's to build these concentration camps. It's to hire people with signing bonuses and $100,000 salaries to start out so that they can harass and terrorize neighborhoods and communities of people without cause or evidence or really anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about student loan debt.
Okay.
So this is an issue we've talked about before on the show. We know that it's an issue. It's a result of consistent defunding of public institutions and financial aid like grants that have existed for a long time.
Right.
And that's shifted more and more students to taking out loans to pay for their education. And so instead of addressing the problem, this law will make it worse. Quote, the OBBBA eliminates existing student loan repayment plans and offers future student loan borrowers only two options for repayment plans, a standard plan and the repayment assistance plan. Currently, there are 4 income-driven plans available, including the Biden-Harris administration's Saving on a Value Education, SAVE plan. the most affordable repayment plan in history. This law eliminates all 4 of these plans and offers borrowers only the wrap, which would dramatically increase payments, especially relative to SAVE. One analysis found that a typical borrower with a college degree would pay an additional $2,929 per year in student loan payments under a wrap.
Wow.
By increasing the cost of monthly payments, the OBBBA forces borrowers to choose between affording their student loan payments and other essential expenses or risking the devastating financial consequences of default. So nearly $3,000 more per year is about $115 per paycheck.
Wow.
And I know that's not a number that I could have afforded when I started paying back my loans after graduating.
Absolutely.
That was not in the budget. I remember getting the number for the standard repayment plan and saying, whoa, what are the other options?
Yeah.
Because that's not it. I am with a master's degree making $32,000 a year. Oof. What am I supposed to do with this number? So, yeah, it's so stupid.
Yeah.
We're actively disincentivizing students from figuring out how to get their education by saying, well, on the other side of this, there's no assistance for this. You are going to borrow however much you need to borrow, and then you have to immediately start paying it back regardless of what your circumstances are on the other side of graduation.
And
good luck.
And paying it at a level you might not be able to afford. And I think about the cost of living now and how out of reach it is for many of us.
Yeah.
And thinking about, I appreciate in this analysis, this idea that people will have to make some choices about what they're able to pay. And if all of a sudden now you're paying $115 per paycheck for this, that might mean that I have to make decisions about something else I'm not going to pay, or I'm not going to pay this in default. And so it's just putting people in such a precarious and a tough situation. And for what?
Yeah. Because this isn't these payment plans aren't costing us more money than
exactly.
Yeah. So it's just
yeah.
It's another way to punish people who can't afford to go to college.
There it is.
Based on their family's previous income.
There it is.
Which, reinforces all kinds of stories about access and stereotypes about who has access to what that has existed throughout the history of this country.
Absolutely. Well, let's stick with education. So one of the other provisions of this act that is troubling to me, all of it, is the efforts to divert public school funding in favor of private schools. And so they shared this in the article, quote, the OBBBA includes a federal 100% tax credit for individuals who donate to private school voucher funds. The legislation creates a permanent, uncapped program that could cost the federal government nearly $51 billion annually. Comparatively, the federal government provides just $14 billion for funding under the Individuals with Disability Education Act and $18 billion for the Title I funding for high poverty schools. Private school voucher programs have been shown to benefit wealthy families over those in need, harm rural communities and students with disabilities, and enable discrimination against students, all without improving academic achievement. And then a little bit later on, they say this, which I think is telling about how this administration is valuing and prioritizing the wealthy over everyone else. Quote, across the country, this diversion of funds from public schools to private schools will eliminate opportunities for the more than 80% of students who attend traditional public schools to instead pay for the wealthy families to send their kids to private school. I don't know, call me crazy for asking this question, but why are we not focusing more on public school funding since 80% of children attend public schools? How could that possibly be the case, I wonder? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I do have an answer for that. It's Brown v. Board, man. It's after Brown v. Board and desegregation happened, white flight happened in massive ways, and people created their own private schools where they could continue their white supremacist nonsense.
Yep.
And this is the continuation of that. This is a direct through line from those choices in the wake of desegregation, or, what was mandated to be desegregation and ended up not really being that, to today and giving people not tax breaks, but a tax credit.
Yes.
An uncapped tax credit, which theoretically means I can dump as much money as I want into a private school voucher program that mostly wealthy people access.
Yep.
And then get a credit back on my taxes for it. It's yeah.
You got it. And by the way, that was the correct answer. So way to go.
Yeah, thank you. Mhm.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, somebody on Threads last week or the week before was like, do you know why there was an increase in private at-home pool construction post World War II? I was like, yeah, Brown v. Board.
Yep. Absolutely.
City pools. I had to allow black people in.
Absolutely.
And people were like,
The white people were like, absolutely not. Yeah, we need another solution.
Yeah, come dig a pool in my backyard.
Absolutely. My goodness.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about application.
Okay.
How does this apply to our day-to-day lives? I think it's going to apply in so many ways to so many people across this country.
Yeah.
And the article closes with this, quote, by stripping away health care and food assistance from working class people and undermining production of American-made energy, the OBBBA will increase the cost of living and lower after-tax income for the bottom 40% of earners, while giving the top 20% of earners a $6,000 per year average tax cut. Several lesser known yet no less extreme changes to the bill will further increase costs, embolden the Trump administration's overreach, and waste taxpayer dollars. So there's less here for regular people, working people, and there's more for the wealthy and for the deportation machine and for Trump's executive power.
Yes.
So that's my application because I think that's what this law will do.
Yes.
What about you? What's your application?
Okay, well, mine's not any sunnier. In the section that talked about the potential overreach of this administration, unaccountable overreach, they said something that really stood out to me, and I wanted to share this application. So they close out that section by saying, quote, under this bill, the Trump administration will have vastly more power and resources to swell a deportation force that makes no distinction between cartel operatives or those with violent criminal records and hardworking people. Seeing this legislation as a license to continue this sort of reckless overreach, the administration will continue to act lawlessly, ignore the Constitution, and chip away at American democracy. And, while that initial part of their analysis there was connected to the funding for and the work of ICE, and the administration's larger enforcement and deportation agenda, I think that last part in particular is applicable to the entire bill and what the entire bill sets out to do. And it's also, I think, applicable to everything about this administration's agenda. And to me, the statement was heavy and a major warning to all of us. If the Trump administration is allowed to continue to operate in this way and accomplish its agenda and the agenda behind Project 2025, there's really no doubt in my mind that our communities and our collective society will suffer and will inch closer and closer to a full-on fascist state and see fascism win. And to me, that's just not something that we can allow to happen.
Yeah, seeing some of these provisions in this article and thinking about what it is that Democrats can and can't do given the lack of sort of elected political power is and their inability really to be useful, effective opposition party to what's happening now. I think they have to be hammering home these things and one by one bringing them back to the floor of Congress to say, no, we want to, this has to be reversed. This has to be reversed. We need to fund more. This is why we need to do this. And making those cases, not just to claw back the meager funding and support that people had before this law was passed, but also to expand it and to say that this is why we need to do this more. And I haven't seen that yet. I'm also not paying a lot of attention to what these Democrats are doing in Congress, because the things that seem meaningful breakthrough, and not a lot of that has happened.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. And yeah, I just hope that they start to see that, okay, this is going to impact real people.
My constituents.
Yes. This is how it's going to impact them. And these are the ways that we have to fight this back and bring these things back into funding. And that just feels like a baseline, easy to understand strategy to pursue, especially as you're sitting in the opposition party, and especially as you're trying to anticipate theoretically an election next year and winning back some seats.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I hope they're listening. That was great.
I doubt it. All right, let's talk about homework. What are we going to do to continue our learning and unlearning work beyond our conversation today? So my homework is to learn a little bit more about this law and what's going to happen with it. This article did a great job, but it scratched the surface of some of the terrible things it's going to do because it focused on those things that are lesser reported on.
Right.
And so there's some things that I know that are happening in the bigger law, but I would like to read a little bit more about kind of what's going on with it in a bigger picture.
Yes.
And there's also an article that dives a little deeper into the increase in funding for ICE, and that's from the American Immigration Council. So I want to read that too. But
yes.
Yeah, what about you?
What's your homework? I'm with you. I want to continue this deep dive into the plans for and the impact of this bill. I've seen some news stories and social media posts out there recently about the timeline for the implementation of all of the various provisions of the act. And so I also want to check all of that out and understand, what's going to happen and exactly when it's going to happen and all of the different aspects of this bill and when they're going to launch and go into effect. And just so I have a solid understanding of that. But I'm also with you, really. I think this scratched the surface, and I appreciate this piece so much. But I think there's a lot more to learn about it, and especially now that it's law.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for our conversation about this big dumb bill.
Yep.
Damien, you're up next time. What are you bringing to the table in our next episode?
Yeah, I think this is kind of related and maybe going to be helpful. I'm bringing a new resource from our friends at Interrupting Criminalization to the table for us to talk about. I think it was just recently released. The report is called Shaping Reality, Building Informational Power to Resist Authoritarianism by Lewis Raven Wallace. And so here's part of the description of the report on their website. Quote, informational power establishes sustained, proactive community control over the facts and information that we need in order to struggle and survive, and that inform how we make sense of the world together and the actions we take to shape our futures. Shaping Reality, Building Informational Power to Resist Authoritarianism, lays out an essential framework and guiding questions for building community-controlled informational infrastructure. In this new report, Interrupting Criminalization's journalism fellow Lewis Raven Wallace explores the need for informational power and informational infrastructure on the left through profiles of 5 local abolitionist organizing efforts and 4 movement media and information projects. It explores how we are already building this kind of power locally and poses questions about what nationally networked informational infrastructure might look like and how to build and fund it. Organizers, activists, movement media makers, journalists, and funders in those areas are encouraged to read, study, discuss, and share feedback on this framework.
Cool.
So, yeah, it looks incredible, the little bits and pieces I clicked around. And so I'm really excited to chat about this resource and dig into it. And yeah, like I said, talk about it with you next time.
Yeah, and it looks like it was published on July 22nd.
Oh, my gosh.
It's very recent.
Very recent.
Before I brought this article that we talked about today, I looked at Interrupting Criminalization to see what new resources they had brought. And I almost brought something from them, but this was not yet published.
Look at that.
When I was looking just
hot
last week.
Off the presses.
Very hot off the presses.
There we go.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what I'm going to ask you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Check us out on YouTube and sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next week.